Okay, we were talking with Congressman Chip Roy a little bit ago. That he's just stepped off the House floor to talk with us about this measure being pushed by the Democrats to codify same-sex marriage into law. And again, I want to go back to the Democratic Senate leader, Chuck Schumer. He had this to say earlier today.
The MAGA Republicans that are taking over the Republican Party have made it abundantly clear they're not satisfied with repealing Roe. As many have openly said, they have now turned their attention now on the Obergefell decision and marriage equality.
We are not satisfied with the court imposing public policy on this nation, especially policy that runs counter to the Constitution. And so what we saw in Roe was after 50 years nearly, they put it back where it belonged, into the hands of policymakers who, as we've already seen, 26 states to some degree or another, understand that life is sacred because it's created in the image of God. That's why it has value. Well, marriage is a sacred institution. It was created by God. And for 5,000 years of human history, it has been seen as a union between a man and a woman. As David Closson, who's still here with me, David, thanks for sticking around, as you were talking about a few minutes ago, while there have been societies and civilizations that have allowed different types of behaviors that under a biblical view would be seen as abominable and sinful, they still recognize as the core of civilization marriage between a man and a woman, because that's where children are both born, raised, reared, and educated and equipped to become the next generation of citizens.
Yeah, you're right, Tony. And that's such an important point to make because, again, Obergefell was decided 7 years ago. That seems kind of like a long time, but it's just a blink of an eye when you consider the full span of human history, which for centuries, for millennia, has recognized marriage between a man and a woman. That's the context that families can flourish. It's the context that children can thrive. It's the context that civilization depends on, a healthy marriage culture. And Tony, this is what the Bible teaches, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. Our colleague George Barna did a poll pretty recently, just a year or so ago, that showed that 34% of evangelicals are actually confused on if the Bible actually addresses this issue. And so in one sense, I think the left's been successful in kind of making us hide when it comes to this issue, but we need to be really, really clear. The Bible speaks clearly on this issue. And there's some issues, the Bible might give us some principles about certain issues that we have to kind of think through and pray about when it comes to policy. On the issue of marriage, there's a thus saith the Lord. There's chapters and verses we can go to, Tony, that show us what God's view on this is. The institution that he created, by the way.
That's a bit disturbing, David. If Christians, 35% would say that only 35% say the Bible speaks with clarity to it?
34%, so just over a third, believe the Bible is ambiguous. So about 65% understand the Bible's clear teaching, but a full third of evangelicals are a little confused about it.
Well, again, we have to look at that definition of evangelical. It's become a very elastic term. But if you read the Bible, you cannot escape the fact that God defines marriage as a union of a man and woman, whether in the Old Testament or New Testament. I mean, Jesus reaffirms it in Matthew chapter 19.
Yes.
Not only does he take on marriage, but he takes on gender too.
Yeah, no, and it's really important, Tony. Whenever Paul or Jesus talk about marriage, whatever the context is, usually in the context of talking about divorce, they immediately go back to Genesis 2.
Right.
Genesis 1 and 2, that's where the foundation, where it all starts. And in Genesis 2:24 is where that editorial comment that Moses makes. Right. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. They shall become one. That's the foundation for a Christian ethic on marriage.
So is a part of this possibly that the church is not teaching and preaching on marriage? I mean, is that an area where when the culture began this redefinition, just as we're seeing from some elected officials a little timid now because the media pounces on anybody who says marriage is a union of a man and a woman, has the church become timid too?
I think somewhat. I think a lot of politicians are comfortable saying, oh, well, this issue is settled, let's move on to other things. I don't think you'd find a lot of pastors that say, oh, the issue is settled, but I think you'll find a lot of pastors who would rather talk about other things that might not put them in the direct crosshairs of where the new sexual orthodoxy is today.
Well, we have to preach the whole counsel of God.
Yeah.
And from Genesis to Revelation, and all of these issues are touched upon. And I think, look, there is going to come a point where we know this experiment is not going to work, and people are going to be looking for answers. And I think it's better that if we have the opportunity to correct it now, we correct it now. And I'm not hesitant to say that. I think we should look at this is yet another creation of the court. Yes. No foundation in history, no foundation in the Constitution, and it will have tragic consequences for our culture and for our country.
Yeah, no, Scalia in his dissent back in the Obergefell decision said that it was, the decision was based on the mystical aphorisms of a fortune cookie. He's right on the legal part, and I think as Christians we need to be clear on what the Bible says as well.
And we're already seeing the fallout from this, so it's not theoretical that there'll be tragic consequences from the redefining. David Closson, thanks so much for stopping in. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony.